Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be taking you through some of the process from making a recent Phoenix commission, so stay tuned. As usual, I'll be starting off painting some black parts with my black chrome acrylic paint. You can use any sort of cheap acrylic paints, it doesn't necessarily have to be this one. So I'm just painting the front of the beak up using this black paint, and then I'll be doing the skin texture in a custom colour, followed by a darker wash. So overall, I did a couple of coats of the black just because I wanted to get the coverage and not have any bleed through of the white. So I put about 2 or 3 coats of paint on, and then I used a varnish to make sure it doesn't get scratched up. Okay, moving on to the skin colour, and I made this custom colour using a skin coloured paint with a sort of a sandy brown colour. I can't remember the names of them, but it's a chrome acrylic paint. And I'm just doing one single layer of this paint to begin with, and then I'll go through once it's dry and put another layer on just to make sure I got that coverage again. And once that's dry, I'll be going over with my wash. So usually with when I paint things, I like to sort of cut in the smaller parts first, and then I can finish the larger areas with a bigger brush. Much like painting a wall, you just want to get the smaller bits in first. Now the reason why I didn't use a straight up skin colour, which you can buy in most acrylic paints, is I find it a bit too pink, and I didn't really want to go for that for this Phoenix, so I mixed up more of a browny colour. Right, finally got that layer down. Now let it dry and I'll come back with that wash. And I'm using a brown colour for the wash. It's mixed with a lot of water, so it doesn't actually put too much paint on. And you can always move it around with a wet brush again. So if it gets too thick in some areas, you can just wash it around, or even dab it off with a tissue paper or something like that. So as you can see, using a wash makes the paint more runny, and that way you can go into any cracks and crevices that you've sculpted into your piece. So it's a really great way to bring out any texture that you want to bring out. So I did end up going in and dabbing a little bit off with tissue paper, just so I could get the colour back out of it, and then I set it aside to dry. So So while it's drying, I'm going to be sculpting the claws of this phoenix, and I'm using this air dry clay that you can find pretty much anywhere. I found it on Etsy, and I'm going to be sculpting over this armature that I've made. This is just jewellery wire. You can find it in any craft stores, nothing special, and I just made up this foot for an armature. Alright, so I'm just going to be putting the clay on and then refining it once all of the pieces are on together. This is the air dry clay. It's got a little bit of bendiness to it, but I wouldn't recommend bending it because it can break. So I'm just sculpting the claw bits. I ended up using epoxy sculpt for the claws just because it was a bit sturdier and looked a bit better too. Now I usually leave the air dry clay to fully dry for a couple of days just to make sure it is fully dry inside. And the clay becomes less workable once it's been exposed to air for a couple of hours, so I try and get it done pretty quickly. So I'm just going to show you the 1 foot. It's exactly the same process as the other one, and here's the final piece. So once the feet have been attached to the armature, I will be sculpting the upper part of the feet. So for now the wires are exposed so I can attach it properly. Alright, moving on to the fur. So this is the fur I'm going to be using. It's called Mongolian faux fur, and I'm using this nice orange colour. It looks a bit red on camera here, but it's actually a nice burnt orange. And my phoenix doll starts with 2 sides, so rather than a 3-piece body, it's actually a 2-piece. And then the feet wrap around the bottom of the claws. So again, I'm just cutting the backing of the fur, so not the actual pile. And this is great fur for actually cutting really fast because the pile separates nicely. And I actually really liked using this Mongolian faux fur for a feather look. So it's got like a clumpy look that kind of resembles feathers, and it's not actually feathers. So it's a good alternative if you didn't want to use real feathers. And with this doll, I'm trying something a little different here. So I wanted to add some yellow to the chest of the phoenix. So I'll show that a little later on. After I've cut the pieces out, I sew up the 2 sides using the sewing machine, and I prefer using the sewing machine because I find it is a bit stronger than actually hand sewing things. So I know a lot of people use hand sewing, but I don't really like the strength of what it can offer. Right, so moving on to the feet again, and I've already attached the feet to the wire armature using those 2 little prongs that I left out. And once they're all connected, I sculpted the top end of the feet, as you know, like birds have a bit more of their feet going up their legs, so it's not all fur. And this clay just attaches itself to itself, so there's really no extra work needed. Alright, so after leaving it to dry for a few days, here's what it looks like. And I'm going to be attaching the fabric to the clay bit using that same tacky fabric glue that I used in my previous videos, and it sticks really well to the clay, so there's no issues with that. So I just load the glue up in the leg, and then I'll leave it to sit for a while so it actually solidifies a little bit and it adheres itself to the leg. Alright, so I'll just do a quick little run through of how I attached that yellow fur to the orange. And I'm using a needle felting tool, and I'm just pushing the fur into the actual backing of the other fur. So much like needle felting, how it just adheres to itself and ends up intertwining so you can't pull it out. This is the same deal. So I didn't have a problem with any of the fur coming out of the backing. So it was a little bit of a time-consuming process. Any needle felter will understand that it's very time-consuming, but I really liked the way it turned out, so I'm definitely going to be incorporating that into more of my dolls. Right, so as you can see, it actually blends in really nicely, and I was really happy with the way it turned out. I didn't want to put too much yellow in there because I didn't want to ruin it, but yeah, really happy with the way it turned out. Alright, so I'm just going to do a quick little look at how I made my wings. I'm not going to go into depth with it because I might do that in a separate video, I might not, I haven't decided yet. But I'm using cruelty-free feathers, and they were quite hard to find. And as you can see, I did use some tape to get the feathers into place, and then I ended up gluing some of the same fur onto the top of the feathers. Alright, so I'm just going to have a little play around with how the feathers would look on the top of the head. I did drill these little holes out so the feathers had somewhere to stick in. So the customer wanted to incorporate reds, oranges, yellows and black into her doll. So for the black, I wanted to, obviously with the front of the beak is black, and I wanted to add some black feathers to the top of the head. So I didn't want to do too much black because it's a bit overpowering, you know, and I wanted to keep it a orange sort of phoenix. So I wanted to go with this sort of combination with the yellow in the middle and a red one as well. I did end up adding a lot of feathers to the head itself, just so it blends in nicely and looks like it's actually a feathered doll. So I attached these feathers using that same tacky fabric glue that I use in everything really, and it worked really great because it's kind of flexible, so it has some give with the feathers. Alright, that is it for me today, guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below and I'll try and get back to you. If you have any ideas of what you want me to make, also leave that in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!